Okay, the next step in our tutorial is we're going to go ahead and create an executable script. We're going to create just the skeleton code for the executable part of our game. This will eventually be an entry point, which we'll talk about in a different video. But for now, just know we're going to create an executable script. And we're going to go ahead and use the env method. There's different ways of creating scripts, and I go more into that in an in-depth video where I talk about the difference between modules and scripts and etc. But for now, just use env Python 3. Now, every time you open up your editor to start writing Python code, get in the habit of doing that. Create this main function and create your if name equals main. I often see code on the internet where people write all their code at the global scope, and that's a terrible practice for multiple reasons. One, you can't write unit tests against that code, and two, you can't even import it into the interpreter. Whenever you import a module, anything at the global scope gets executed immediately. So if it's just variables, it's not a problem, but if you have any statements, those statements all get executed immediately, which makes it impossible to import. So just never do it. Always have a main function. You don't have to call it main if you want to, but there's really no reason not to. Always have a main function. Always do this if name equals main. Always. In your executable scripts. Obviously not necessary in a module. Something else I want to introduce you to right now is a docstring. Python has special comments called docstrings that are really used to document your code in specific ways. There's a lot of external applications that will extract your docstrings and turn them into usable documentation. Docstrings function a lot like the long strings in Python, where you use the 3 double quotes or the 3 single quotes. It can be multi-line, it can be all in the same line. So you should have one at the beginning of all of your modules and scripts, as well as functions and classes. Now, we don't want to put much in this main executable. All we're going to do is create an instance of a game object, which doesn't exist yet, and start it. And that should be enough for this main script. Now, before we go any further with this, there's 2 more things I need to introduce to you. One is the initpy file. In Python, it doesn't know that something's a package or a module that can be imported unless there's an init.py file. Normally this file is just an empty file, but it needs to exist in all the subdirectories, including the root directory. Without that, you wouldn't be able to import Hangman, whatever. Additionally, I want to talk about pylint, which is a linter. Linters are static code analyzers. They go through all your code, they check for compliance with coding standards, they check for logic errors, all kinds of good stuff. Pylint is an excellent tool that you should get used to using on all of your code. I will go into more detail on pylint in a separate in-depth video, but for now we are going to start running pylint against all the code we write in this tutorial. So right away we're going to run into some problems. First of all, the game class doesn't even exist. And second of all, we haven't updated the Python path. When you use pip or the setup tools to install a Python package, it puts it in a place that Python by default will pick up. Otherwise, you have to explicitly state using the Python path environment variable where your code is going to be. And we're going to use that method for this tutorial. So we want to add to the Python path the parent directory of wherever the code is. So in our case, we want to go right up to that source directory, because from that point forward it'll pick up the Hangman package, which is what we're creating. But the other thing we need to do is actually create that game class. Now, we're not going to create the whole class right now, but we can create just a temporary file there so that at least we can run pylint against it. So that would go into game.py. And we create a start method, which we have to specify. Pass in Python, if you see that, just means don't do anything. It's just a It's just an empty line. It says don't do anything. Now there's one last thing we need to do here. We need to actually import the game class. Now normally, we're going to go over here and, we've created that temporary game module. Normally you do something like from hangman.game, because that's the, the name of the file. Import game, which is the name of the class. But we're going to just do from hangman import game, and I'm going to show you a little trick that will make that work. In that init.py file there at that root level, we're going to import game there. That makes it available at the Hangman level so that this import statement here will now work. I'm also going to create this variable called Dunder all Dunder and put game into it. That allows me to do an import splat, which you should never do, but it's still standard practice to put that in your init.py file. I'll talk more about the different ways of importing in a separate in-depth video. While I'm in here, I'm going to go ahead and create a version variable as well. Oh, and I want to include my docstring. We can go ahead and run pylint against that to make sure that it's compliant. And if there's no problems, you get a perfect 10 out of 10, which is a great score. Now that we've updated our Python path and we've created a dummy game module, let's go ahead and run pylint again against that main class. And now the score is good. So we've created our main function and we've added our init.pys and we've introduced pylint. In the next video, we'll go ahead and actually flesh out that game class, which is going to be the heavy lifter for our program.